Apparently, being kicked out of your own brother's wedding is what they call family bonding in the South. There I was, standing in the drizzle outside a boutique venue in downtown Asheville, holding a cream-colored envelope that everyone assumed contained $5,000. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But we'll get to that delicious detail in a minute, because first, let me paint you the picture of how a 29-year-old tax accountant goes from beloved sister to persona non grata in approximately 45 seconds. It was Saturday, October 14th, around 3:55 p.m., 5 minutes before my brother Graham's wedding ceremony was supposed to start. I'd driven just over 2 hours from Charlotte in my sensible Honda Accord, wearing the midi-length navy dress that Clarice herself had approved via text 3 weeks earlier. She'd even sent me a thumbs-up emoji and, "Perfect, babe. Can't wait to see you." Yeah, about that enthusiasm. I pulled into the parking garage, touched up my lipstick in the rearview mirror, and walked toward the venue entrance with my gift envelope tucked safely in my Kate Spade clutch. The place was one of those converted warehouse spaces that screams, "We spent way too much on this wedding, but we'll pretend we got a deal." All exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and overpriced signature cocktails. Very Instagram-worthy. Very Clarice. As I approached the entrance, I spotted the bride herself holding court with her bridesmaids near the door. 6 women in matching blush pink gowns that probably cost more than my car payment. All perfectly curled hair and champagne flutes at 4 p.m. on a Saturday. Living the dream, right? Clarice saw me approaching, and her smile did this weird thing. Kind of froze, then stretched wider, like someone had pulled a string on a puppet. You know that look. The "oh no, not her" disguised as, "Oh yay, you're here! Tessa! Oh my God, sweetie!" She rushed toward me, arms spread wide, but somehow positioned herself directly in my path to the door. Behind her, I could see through the glass panels into the main ballroom. Tables set with ivory linens, centerpieces dripping with roses and eucalyptus. And, here's the interesting part, at least 35 empty chairs scattered throughout the room. "I'm so sorry," Clarice said, her hand landing on my forearm with just a touch too much pressure. "We're completely packed in there. Like fire marshal is literally counting heads packed. I feel terrible, but we just can't fit anyone else." I blinked. Slowly. Did the math in my head? The venue capacity was 200. The invitation list was 160. Unless 40 people had spontaneously combusted in the last 3 minutes, the mathematics weren't mathematicking. "Fire code," one of her bridesmaids chimed in helpfully, nodding like she'd just solved world hunger. "Right," I said, my voice doing that thing where it stays perfectly pleasant, but my left eye does a little twitch. "Fire code, of course." Clarice's smile got impossibly wider. "You understand. I knew you would. You're always so sweet about everything." Behind me, 2 more guests brushed past and walked directly through the door. No resistance, no fire code concerns, just straight through like Moses parting the Red Sea. Except, apparently I was the plague being blocked out. I stood there for exactly 5 seconds, I counted, watching those guests disappear into the venue while Clarice and her pink dress battalion formed a human wall between me and my brother's wedding. And something in my brain, the part that had been dealing with Clarice's nonsense for the entire 1.5 years Graham had been dating her, just clicked into place. "Well," I said, reaching into my clutch and pulling out that cream envelope, "I completely understand. Fire safety first, right?" I held out the envelope directly to Clarice. "At least let me give you this. Congratulations on your big day." Her eyes lit up like a slot machine hitting jackpot. She knew what she thought was in there. We'd had an entire phone conversation 6 weeks ago where she'd dropped approximately 17 hints about their honeymoon fund and how any contribution would be so appreciated. And Graham mentioned you'd been doing really well at work. I'd been deliberately vague. Said things like, "I'll make sure you're taken care of," and "Don't worry about it." Apparently, Clarice's brain translated that into $5,000 check guaranteed. Translation in her mind, "Gimme money." Clarice practically snatched the envelope from my hand. "Oh, Tessa, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," I interrupted, meeting her eyes with the kind of smile I save for clients who think they can lie to the IRS. "Really? You two deserve everything that's coming to you." The The bridesmaids were already peeking over her shoulder, trying to catch a glimpse of the envelope's contents. One of them whispered something about, "She's so generous." I stepped back, still smiling. "Enjoy your day, Clarice. I hope it's everything you've dreamed of." Then I turned and walked back through that misty October drizzle toward my car, my heels clicking against the wet pavement, and I didn't look back once. Not when I heard Clarice call out, "Thanks again," in that sing-song voice. Not when her bridesmaids started giggling about something. Not even when I reached my Honda and had to wipe raindrops off my windshield before getting in. I sat in the driver's seat, turned on the heat, and checked my phone. 4:03 p.m. The ceremony was starting. Inside that building, my parents were probably confused about where I was. Graham was probably too focused on his bride to notice. And Clarice? Well, Clarice was about to have an interesting evening. I started my car, pulled out of the parking garage, and headed toward downtown Asheville. There was a Bojangles about 6 minutes away, and I suddenly had a powerful craving for fried chicken and sweet tea. Comfort food for the soul, you know? My phone started buzzing around 4:35 p.m. I was at a red light, so I glanced at the screen. Text from Mom. "Where are you sitting? Can't find you." The ceremony would have just ended, which meant Clarice had opened that envelope during the brief window between "I do" and the start of the reception. Probably couldn't wait to start counting her haul. Apparently, one of the bridesmaids later told someone who told Vera that Clarice had ripped it open right there in the bridal suite while the photographer was setting up family photos. I texted back, "Couldn't make it in. Fire code. Tell Graham I love him." The light turned green. I drove another block. Phone buzzed again. Graham this time. "What do you mean you're not here?" I didn't respond. I was pulling into the Bojangles drive-thru, and frankly, choosing between a 3-piece meal and family drama wasn't really a choice at all. By the time I placed my order, chicken, biscuit, potato rounds, large sweet tea, my phone was having a full-scale meltdown. Texts, calls, voicemails piling up like digital tumbleweeds. I paid at the window, collected my bag, parked in a space near the back of the lot, and finally looked at my phone. 17 missed calls, 23 texts, and one voicemail from Clarice that was just screaming. Not words, just this high-pitched wail that my phone speaker could barely handle. I took a bite of perfectly seasoned fried chicken and opened the texts. "Graham, what did you do?" "Mom, Tessa Marie Hartwell, call me right now." "Dad, we need to talk. This is serious." Graham again. "Clarice is hysterical. The wedding is ruined. Call me." I chewed slowly, savored it, washed it down with sweet tea that tasted like justice mixed with high-fructose corn syrup. Then my phone rang. Clarice. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello? You. How could you?" She was somewhere between sobbing and shrieking, words dissolving into incoherent rage. "My wedding day." "Fire code," I said calmly, taking another sip of tea. "I completely understand." Click. I hung up, turned off my phone, and finished my chicken in blessed silence. Because here's the thing about being a tax accountant. You learn pretty quickly that documentation beats emotion every single time. And that envelope Clarice had just opened in front of her bridesmaids, probably expecting a nice fat check to deposit on Monday morning. It contained copies of 3 years of bank statements showing unreported income from her boutique, PayPal records documenting cash transactions she never declared, a detailed breakdown showing at least $47,000 in tax debt that I'd discovered, with a cover letter noting I suspected the actual number was significantly higher, copies of the formal complaint I'd filed with the IRS 6 weeks ago, complete with case number and filing date, and a letter from me on my firm's letterhead explaining that the IRS had been notified that Clarice should have received official notification by certified mail approximately 10 days ago, and that her mandatory audit was scheduled for Monday, October 16th at 8 a.m. at the IRS field office in Charlotte. All completely legal, all thoroughly documented, all signed by yours truly, CPA. Clarice had made one critical mistake. She'd asked me for a favor back in August, wanting me to just glance over her business finances because she was worried about some numbers. She'd assumed that family loyalty meant I'd help her hide her fraud. Instead, I'd spent 6 weeks building an airtight case and reporting it to the appropriate federal authorities. And now, she knew that I knew, and that the government knew, and that pretending it would go away wasn't going to work. Welcome to the family, Clarice. We're so glad you're here. You know what's funny about family? They'll ignore you for months, but the second you stop playing doormat, suddenly, you're everyone's priority. I kept my phone off for exactly 2 hours, finished my chicken, drove through downtown Asheville enjoying the fall colors like a tourist with zero family obligations. Around 6:30 p.m., I finally turned it back on. Big mistake. My voicemail box was full, completely maxed out. I didn't even know that was still possible in 2023, but apparently when you ruin a wedding, technology finds a way. I scrolled through the carnage while sitting in the parking lot of a Barnes & Noble because nothing says I'm having a crisis quite like retail therapy involving overpriced hardcovers. The texts were a journey through the 5 stages of grief, except everyone was stuck on anger. Graham, 4:47 p.m. Clarice opened your gift in front of everyone. Mom had to take her to the bathroom. She's hyperventilating. Dad wants to know what the hell is going on. Call me. Mom, 5:02 p.m. I don't understand what happened. Clarice is saying you reported her to the IRS? On her wedding day? This has to be a misunderstanding. Please call me back. Graham, 5:15 p.m. The photographer got pictures of Clarice crying. She's talking about suing you for emotional distress. You need to fix this now. Dad, 5:23 p.m. Tessa, call me. This is beyond inappropriate. And then, the real gem. Graham at 5:58 p.m. Mom and Dad are embarrassed. Clarice's parents are threatening to leave. You've ruined everything. Hope you're proud of yourself. I sat there reading that last message 3 times. Hope you're proud of yourself. Like I was some petulant child who'd thrown a tantrum, not a certified public accountant who'd reported federal tax fraud to the appropriate authorities. Here's what Graham didn't mention in any of those texts. How Clarice had asked me to help her fix her books back in August. How she'd sat in my office conference room with her laptop and a smile that would have made a used car salesman proud, explaining how her little online boutique was doing surprisingly well, but she was confused about taxes. I'd spent 3 hours that afternoon going through her records. PayPal transactions she'd never reported. Venmo payments marked as gifts that were clearly business income. A whole separate bank account her accountant apparently didn't know about. Cash deposits that magically appeared every week like clockwork. When I'd asked her about the unreported income, she'd laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, that's just friend and family stuff. I don't need to claim that, right? It's not like real business income. $47,000 of friend and family stuff that I could document, and I suspected there was a lot more buried deeper. I'd explained, very carefully, that the IRS doesn't care what you call it. Income is income. She needed to file amended returns immediately and set up a payment plan. Clarice had stared at me like I'd suggested she donate a kidney, but that's going to cost so much money. And Graham and I are trying to save for the wedding. Can't you just, I don't know, make it look different? You're an accountant. Isn't that what you do? That's when I'd realized my future sister-in-law thought accountant was just a fancy word for criminal accomplice with a calculator. I'd told her no, explained that what she was asking me to do was fraud, that I could lose my license, face criminal charges, and destroy my entire career. She'd pouted, actually stuck out her bottom lip like a toddler denied a cookie, and said, "But we're going to be family soon." Like that magical word family was a get-out-of-jail-free card for federal crimes. She'd left my office that day promising she'd handle it and talk to a tax attorney. I'd documented our entire conversation in my client notes, because I'm not an idiot. When 3 weeks passed and I'd seen her posting about wedding dress fittings and honeymoon plans to Bali without a single mention of amended tax returns, I'd done what any responsible CPA would do. I'd reported it, not out of spite. Not because I'm some kind of villain, but because the law is pretty clear about tax professionals who knowingly ignore fraud. You become complicit. And I'd worked too hard for my CPA license to flush it down the toilet for someone who thought tax evasion was a personality quirk. But sure, Graham, I'd ruined everything. I finally called him back around 7:00 p.m. He answered on the first ring. Do you have any idea what you've done? No hello. No, hey sis. Just immediate attack mode. Hey Graham, how's married life treating you? Been married for what, 3 hours now? This isn't funny, Tessa. Clarice is devastated. She's upstairs in the bridal suite crying. Mom's up there with her. The reception is half empty because people are uncomfortable. Her parents are talking about leaving early. You've completely destroyed her day. I took a deep breath. Did Clarice mention why I reported her to the IRS? She said you guys had a misunderstanding about her business records, that you overreacted to some paperwork confusion. Paperwork confusion? That's what she's calling $47,000 in tax fraud that I documented. And probably a lot more I didn't have access to? Silence on the other end. Then, that's not... She said it was way less than that. She lied to you, Graham. Just like she lied to the federal government. I spent 3 hours going through her records in August. She asked me to help her hide income. I said no. She ignored my advice. I reported her. That's not overreacting. That's doing my job. More silence. I could hear music in the background. Some acoustic love song that was wildly inappropriate for the current vibe. You could have waited, Graham finally said. You didn't have to give her those documents today, on her wedding day. I didn't do it today. I filed the report 6 weeks ago. The IRS scheduled the audit and sent her certified notice 10 days ago. She's been ignoring it. I just made sure she couldn't ignore it anymore. Would you have preferred she found out when federal agents showed up at your honeymoon hotel? You could have talked to me first. And there it was. The real issue. Not that Clarice had committed fraud. Not that she'd tried to drag me into it, but that I hadn't asked Big Brother for permission before following federal law. Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. If I'd come to you and said your fiancé is committing tax fraud, would you have taken my side? The pause told me everything I needed to know. She's my wife now, Tessa. You're going to have to see her at family events, holidays. This is going to make everything weird. She made it weird when she tried to make me an accessory to federal crimes. I just documented it. Mom and Dad are furious. Mom and Dad can call me themselves if they want to discuss it. I'm not hiding. Clarice wants you to drop the complaint. I actually laughed at that. Couldn't help it. That's not how the IRS works, Graham. I can't just call them up and say, never mind. She committed fraud. She has to deal with the consequences. You're being vindictive. I'm being a law-abiding CPA. There's a difference. She blocked you from the wedding because she knew you'd found out about the audit and she thought you'd cause a scene. Ah, there it was. The truth finally emerging like a groundhog in spring. So she admitted it wasn't actually a fire code issue? Graham hesitated. She was worried you'd be upset about the tax thing and make a scene during the ceremony. So she kicked me out preemptively, took my envelope expecting $5,000, and then had a meltdown when she discovered I'd given her exactly what she deserved instead. When you say it like that, how else should I say it, Graham? She excluded me from my own brother's wedding, humiliated me in front of her bridesmaids, and then threw a tantrum when she faced consequences for her own illegal actions. But I'm the bad guy? You're my sister. She's my wife. I'm stuck in the middle here. No, you're not. You're choosing a side. You're just uncomfortable admitting which one. He sighed, long and heavy. The kind of sigh that means, I know you're right, but I'm going to pretend you're not because it's easier. Can you at least apologize to her? Just to smooth things over? I hung up. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't give him a chance to guilt-trip me further. Just pressed the red button and sat there in the Barnes & Noble parking lot watching the sun set over Asheville and wondering when exactly my family had decided that keeping the peace meant I had to set myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. My phone buzzed. Mom this time. Tessa Marie, we need to talk about your behavior today. I stared at that text for a solid minute. My behavior. Not Clarice's fraud, not Graham's enabling. Not the fact that I'd been excluded from a family wedding and humiliated. My behavior. I turned off my phone again. Drove to a Courtyard Marriott. Booked a room for the night. Ordered room service. A burger that cost $30 because hotel restaurants are basically armed robbery with garnish, and watched Netflix until I fell asleep. Tomorrow was Sunday. The audit was Monday morning. And somewhere in Asheville, Clarice was enjoying her wedding night, knowing that in approximately 36 hours, she'd be sitting across from an IRS auditor explaining where all that unreported income came from. Fire code. I completely understood. Sunday morning, I woke up in that hotel room to 17 new voicemails, and the kind of headache that comes from either too much wine or too much family drama. Since I hadn't touched alcohol, I knew which one to blame. I ordered coffee from room service, $8 for something that probably cost them 30 cents to make, and finally listened to the messages while watching some terrible morning show interview a celebrity I'd never heard of. Mom's voicemail from 10:30 p.m. Saturday. Tessa, I'm very disappointed in you. Clarice is family now. We don't air family business to government agencies. Call me when you're ready to apologize. Interesting how family suddenly included someone who'd known us for 18 months, but didn't extend to the daughter who'd been around for 29 years. Dad's message from 10:30 p.m. Your mother is upset. Graham is upset. I think you should reconsider your approach here. There are ways to handle these things privately. Right. Because tax fraud is just one of those little family quirks we handle at Thanksgiving dinner between the turkey and pumpkin pie. But the third voicemail? That's the one that made me sit up straight and spill $8 coffee on the hotel comforter. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Female voice? Late 20s, maybe? Nervous. Hi. My name is Vera. Vera Sutton. I was one of Clarice's bridesmaids yesterday. The one in the pink dress standing closest to the door when you left. I got your number from the wedding contact list. I hope that's okay. I need to talk to you about something. About Clarice. It's important. Can you call me back? Please don't mention this to her or Graham. Just, please call me. I replayed it 3 times. Vera Sutton. I vaguely remembered her from yesterday. Shorter than the other bridesmaids. Blonde hair and one of those complicated updos that probably took 3 hours and a medieval torture device to achieve. She'd been the one who looked uncomfortable when Clarice had blocked me from the door. I called her back at 9:30 a.m. She answered immediately. Oh, thank God. I wasn't sure you'd call. You sounded pretty urgent in your message. What's going on? Breathing on the other end. Then, can we meet? I don't want to do this over the phone. Are you still in Asheville? I am. Where do you want to meet? There's a Starbucks on Merriman Avenue, the one near the Whole Foods. Can you be there in an hour? I showered, checked out of the hotel, and drove to the Starbucks, wondering what kind of bridesmaid drama I was about to walk into. Maybe Vera wanted to yell at me for ruining the wedding. Maybe she was going to try to guilt me into dropping the IRS complaint. Maybe she was a secret accountant who wanted tax advice. I got there first. Ordered a grande cold brew, and sat at a corner table where I could see the door. Vera arrived 10 minutes later, looking nothing like the polished bridesmaid from yesterday. Jeans, oversized sweater, hair in a messy ponytail, and the kind of dark circles under her eyes that suggested she'd slept about as well as I had. She ordered some complicated drink with oat milk and 7 modifiers, then slid into the chair across from me. Thank you for meeting me, she said quietly, both hands wrapped around her cup like she needed the warmth. Your message made it sound pretty serious. It is. She took a breath. I've known Clarice since college. We were roommates sophomore through senior year at UNC. I know things about her. Things Graham doesn't know. Things your family doesn't know. Oh, this was getting interesting. What kind of things? Vera pulled out her phone, scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward me. It was a screenshot of a text conversation from August 20th, right around the time Clarice had come to my office. The messages were between Vera and Clarice. Clarice, Graham's sister is such a tight buttoned-up witch. Asked her to help with my taxes and she totally freaked out. Vera, what did you ask her to do? Clarice, just some creative accounting. Nothing major. She acted like I asked her to rob a bank, lol. Clarice, whatever. I'll figure it out. Graham makes enough money that we'll be fine even if the IRS comes sniffing around. Vera, you're going to use Graham's money to pay your tax debt? Clarice, that's what husbands are for, babe. His income, my spending? That's how marriage works. I stared at the messages, then at Vera. Why are you showing me this? Because you need to know what she's planning. She's not going to that audit tomorrow. She's going to send Graham instead. She told me last night after you hung up on him. She's going to play the devastated bride card and make Graham handle everything. Then she's going to use his money and his connections to make this disappear. My stomach dropped. Graham doesn't know about the full extent of the fraud, does he? No clue. She's been feeding him some story about minor accounting errors and how you're overreacting because you don't like her. And here's the thing. Vera hesitated. Graham believes her. He thinks you're being vindictive because she didn't invite you to the wedding. She literally told him she blocked me on purpose. She told him it was because she was worried you'd cause a scene, not because she was trying to humiliate you. She's been playing victim since she opened that envelope, crying, talking about how you've always been jealous of her relationship with Graham, how you can't stand that he chose her over his family. I sat back in my chair, processing. Why are you telling me this? You're her bridesmaid, her college friend. Vera's jaw tightened. Because I'm tired of watching her manipulate everyone around her. She did this same thing in college, got in trouble for plagiarism, and convinced her professor that her roommate, me, had sabotaged her paper. I almost got expelled. And when the truth came out, she never apologized. Just said I was too sensitive and needed to get over it. Then why were you in her wedding? Because she's very good at making you feel like you're the crazy one for questioning her. And because I was hoping marriage to a decent guy like Graham would change her. But yesterday, when she opened your envelope and immediately started planning how to manipulate Graham into fixing everything, Vera shook her head. She hasn't changed at all. I studied Vera carefully. What do you want from me? I want you to go to that audit tomorrow. Don't let her send Graham. Don't let her wiggle out of this. She needs to face actual consequences for once in her life, and she pulled out a USB drive from her purse and slid it across the table. I have more. Text messages where she admitted hiding income. Screenshots of group chats where she bragged about not paying taxes. Social media posts she later deleted showing off expensive purchases she wrote off as business expenses. Conversations where she literally told me she was dodging the IRS. Everything from the past 3 years that I documented legally. I looked at the USB drive like it was a live grenade. Why do you have all of this? Because I've been documenting her behavior for years. Every text she sent me. Every conversation we had. Screenshots of her social media before she deleted incriminating posts. I kept thinking maybe I'd need it someday to protect myself from her. Turns out, I needed it to protect your brother instead. I picked up the drive. This is admissible evidence. You know that, right? If the IRS uses this, Clarice could face serious criminal charges, not just penalties. Actual jail time. Good. Vera's voice was steady. Cold, even. Maybe that'll finally teach her that actions have consequences. We sat there for a moment in that Starbucks, 2 women bonded by the shared experience of being underestimated by someone who thought charm could override accountability. There's one more thing, Vera said. Clarice's parents. They don't know about any of this. They think their daughter runs a legitimate business. They're loaded. Her dad owns 3 car dealerships in Raleigh. She's been planning to borrow money from them to pay off the tax debt if Graham's money doesn't cover it. So she's going to drag her parents into her fraud cleanup? That's Clarice. She'll burn down everyone around her as long as she stays warm. I finished my cold brew, slipped the USB drive into my purse, and looked at Vera. Thank you for this. Seriously. Don't thank me. Just make sure she doesn't destroy your brother's life. He seems like a good guy. He deserves better than someone who sees him as an ATM with a nice smile. I drove back to Charlotte that afternoon with the USB drive sitting in my passenger seat like a tiny nuclear weapon. Got home to my apartment, fed my cat, Mabel, a cranky tabby who'd been judging me since 2020, and plugged the drive into my laptop. 3 hours later, I'd reviewed everything. Screenshots of text conversations where Clarice discussed receiving cash payments under the table that she wasn't reporting. Group chat messages where she laughed about the IRS never catching on. Deleted Instagram posts, which Vera had screenshotted, showing designer handbags and spa trips Clarice had listed as business expenses. Email screenshots that Clarice had sent to Vera asking for advice on creative accounting. Facebook messages where Clarice compared notes with other boutique owners about avoiding sales tax reporting. Venmo payment descriptions that were clearly business income disguised as birthday gifts and just because. It was a prosecutor's dream and an accountant's nightmare. I copied everything to a secure folder, encrypted it, and sent it to my work email with a note. Additional documentation for IRS audit, Clarice Hartwell, Monday, October 16th. All evidence obtained from legal sources, voluntary communications, and public social media posts. Then I called Henderson and Associates' senior partner, Ruth Henderson, at her home number. She answered on the third ring, sounding like I'd interrupted her Sunday gardening. Tessa? Everything all right? I need you at the audit tomorrow, the one for Clarice Hartwell. I have significant additional evidence, and I think this is going to be bigger than we initially thought. How much bigger? Potential criminal charges bigger. Ruth was quiet for a moment. Forward me everything. I'll review it tonight and meet you there at 8. This changes things significantly. I hung up, looked at Mabel and said, "Tomorrow's going to be a train wreck." Mabel yawned. Even my cat knew drama when she heard it. My phone rang at 9 p.m. Ruth. "I've been reviewing this for 3 hours," she said, and I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "This is bad, Tessa. Really bad. The evidence is solid. All legally obtained communications and public posts. Cancel any plans you had for sleeping tonight because I'm printing everything, organizing it by category and date, and creating a comprehensive evidence packet. We're both going to that audit, and I'm bringing documentation that's going to blow this case wide open. You think it's that serious? I think your sister-in-law has been running a systematic tax evasion scheme for years, and we just got handed legally admissible evidence to prove it. Every screenshot is time-stamped. Every communication shows intent. This isn't sloppy bookkeeping. This is deliberate fraud. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be long." I tried to sleep. Mostly, I stared at the ceiling, thinking about Graham and how his perfect wedding day had turned into the opening act of a federal investigation. But you know what? Sometimes the truth hurts, and sometimes it's exactly what people need to hear. Monday morning, October 16th, 7:45 a.m. I walked into the IRS field office on West Trade Street in Charlotte wearing my navy suit, carrying my briefcase, and running on approximately 4 hours of sleep and pure spite. Ruth Henderson was already there, sitting in the waiting area with her own briefcase, and the kind of expression that said she'd reviewed all the evidence and was ready to watch someone's world crumble in real time. "Morning," she said, standing up. "I've got 3 binders of documentation. Every screenshot is organized chronologically with timestamps. Every communication is clearly labeled with source and context. This is airtight. Good, because I have a feeling this is going to get ugly. The subject was notified of this audit 10 days ago via certified mail. Has she contacted you at all?" "Not directly. My brother called yesterday asking me to reconsider filing the complaint. I told him that's not how federal investigations work." Ruth nodded. "Is he coming with her?" According to a source, Clarice was planning to send him alone, make him handle it while she played victim at home. That's not going to work. We specifically requested her presence. If she no-shows, that's another strike against her. At exactly 8 a.m., the door opened. Graham walked in. Alone. He saw me and stopped dead in his tracks. His expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and then anger in about 3 seconds flat. "What are you doing here?" "I'm the reporting CPA. I have to be here." "Where's Clarice?" "She's not feeling well. The stress of all this has been too much. I'm here to represent her." Ruth stood up, extending her hand. "Ruth Henderson, senior partner at Henderson and Associates. You must be Graham Hartwell. I'm afraid your wife needs to be present for this audit. It's not optional." Graham's jaw tightened. "She's my wife. I can speak for her. Not in a federal tax audit. You can't." Ruth's voice was pleasant but immovable. IRS regulations require the taxpayer to be present unless there's a documented medical emergency requiring hospitalization. Does your wife have such documentation? She's emotionally distressed. Then she can be emotionally distressed here. We'll wait 30 minutes. Call her. Graham pulled out his phone and walked to the corner of the waiting room. I could hear him murmuring, his voice getting progressively more frustrated. Finally, he came back. "She'll be here in 45 minutes. Ruth checked her watch. "We'll reschedule for 9 a.m. then. But Mr. Hartwell, I need to be clear. If your wife doesn't show up, the IRS will proceed without her cooperation. That typically doesn't end well for the taxpayer." We waited in that office for 53 minutes. Graham sat across from me, not speaking, just staring at his phone and occasionally shooting me looks that could have melted steel. At 8:53 a.m., Clarice finally walked through the door. She looked nothing like the polished bride from Saturday. Yoga pants, oversized hoodie, hair in a messy bun, no makeup. The universal uniform of someone who wanted to look like a victim. She'd even brought a tissue, which she was clutching like a prop. When she saw me, her eyes went wide. "You're here? I'm the reporting accountant. Of course I'm here. But I thought..." She looked at Graham helplessly. "You said she was just being vindictive. That this would all go away." Graham stood up, putting his arm around her. "It's okay. We'll handle this." Ruth gestured toward the conference room door. "Shall we?" The IRS auditor was a woman named Paulina Briggs, late 40s, with the kind of neutral expression that came from years of hearing excuses. She had 3 folders on the table, a laptop open, and the energy of someone who'd seen every trick in the book and was unimpressed by all of them. "Mrs. Hartwell, thank you for joining us. I'm Agent Briggs with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division." Clarice's face went pale. "Criminal investigation?" "Based on the initial report and documentation provided by Ms. Hartwell here, this case has been elevated beyond a standard audit. Let's begin." Agent Briggs opened the first folder. "Your business, Southern Charm Boutique, has reported gross receipts of $23,000 for tax year 2022. However, we have bank records showing deposits of $91,000 to your personal account during that same period. Can you explain the discrepancy?" Clarice looked at Graham. Graham looked at me. I looked at my notes. "Those were gifts," Clarice finally said, her voice shaky. "From friends and family. I don't have to report gifts. According to the Bank Secrecy Act, structured deposits designed to avoid reporting requirements are illegal. You made 47 deposits of exactly $1,900 each over 12 months. That's not gift-giving behavior. That's structured evasion." Graham leaned forward. "Wait, Clarice. You told me this was about some unreported PayPal transactions. You said it was maybe $5,000. Agent Briggs looked at him with something resembling pity. "Mr. Hartwell, the current calculation of unreported income over 3 tax years is approximately $162,000. With penalties and interest, your wife currently owes the federal government approximately $218,000 in back taxes and civil penalties." The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop in Antarctica. Graham turned to Clarice slowly. $218,000? Clarice started crying. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind. "I was going to tell you. I just needed time to figure it out. And then your sister got involved and everything spiraled and I didn't know what to do. You told me it was $5,000. You said Tessa was overreacting. I didn't want you to worry. We're on our honeymoon planning and I didn't want to stress you out." "We're not on our honeymoon, Clarice. We're in a federal investigation." Agent Briggs cleared her throat. "If I may continue. We also have evidence of fraudulent expense claims. You deducted $32,000 in business expenses that appear to be personal purchases, designer handbags, spa treatments, a weekend trip to Miami that was listed as a business conference." Ruth slid the first binder across the table. "We have additional documentation provided by a third party. All evidence was obtained legally through voluntary communications and publicly available sources. Text message screenshots where Mrs. Hartwell explicitly discusses hiding income from the IRS. Social media posts, later deleted but captured beforehand, showing luxury purchases claimed as business expenses. Group chat conversations where she compared strategies with other sellers for avoiding tax reporting." Clarice looked at the binder like it was a snake. "Where did you get that?" "A concerned party who documented your voluntary communications over several years," Ruth said smoothly. All fully admissible under federal evidence rules. Graham stood up suddenly. I need a minute. He walked out of the conference room, and through the glass wall, I could see him pacing in the hallway, hands on his head. Clarice turned to me, her face blotchy with tears. Why are you doing this to me? What did I ever do to you? You tried to make me complicit in federal fraud. You excluded me from my own brother's wedding. You attempted to manipulate my family against me. And when I followed the law, you painted me as the villain. I leaned forward slightly. But honestly, Clarice, this isn't about you and me. This is about you thinking the rules don't apply if you smile pretty enough. Agent Briggs cut in. Mrs. Hartwell, given the severity of the fraud and the evidence of intentional evasion, I'm recommending this case be referred to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. You're looking at potential charges of tax evasion under Title 26 U.S.C. Section 7201, which carries up to 5 years in federal prison and criminal fines of up to $250,000, separate from the civil tax debt. Clarice's crying intensified into hyperventilating. Prison? I can't go to prison. Graham, please. But Graham didn't come back inside. He was still in the hallway, phone to his ear, and from his expression he was probably calling a lawyer. A real one this time. Not whatever cut-rate accountant Clarice had been using to file her fraudulent returns. The meeting lasted another 90 minutes. Agent Briggs went through every transaction, every unreported deposit, every fake deduction. Ruth presented the evidence systematically. Screenshots organized by date, social media posts with timestamps, Venmo transactions showing business income disguised as personal gifts. Clarice alternated between crying, making excuses, and trying to blame her confusing accounting software. By the time we finished, Clarice had been given 30 days to secure legal representation and respond to the findings. The criminal referral would proceed regardless. Agent Briggs made it very clear. Cooperation might reduce sentencing, but the charges were coming. We walked out of that building at 11:47 a.m. Graham was sitting on a bench outside, head in his hands. Clarice rushed to him immediately. Graham, baby, I'm so sorry. I'll fix this. My parents can lend us money. We can set up a payment plan. It'll be okay. He stood up, looked at her, and I saw something in my brother's face I'd never seen before. Complete and utter disillusionment. Your parents, he said quietly. You were planning to drag your parents into this? They have money. They can help. You lied to me, Clarice. About everything. The amount, the severity. You made me think my sister was crazy for reporting you. You made me choose between my wife and my family based on lies. I was scared. You were selfish. He looked at me. Tessa, I'm sorry. For everything. You were right. I nodded. Didn't gloat. Didn't say, I told you so. Just nodded. Graham walked away toward his car. Clarice followed, still crying, still making excuses. Ruth and I stood there watching them leave. That was brutal, Ruth said. That was justice, I corrected. We got lunch at a nearby deli. I ordered a Reuben sandwich and actually tasted it this time, not just stress eating like the Bojangles chicken on Saturday. My phone buzzed. Text from Vera. How'd it go? Me. Criminal charges pending. Over $200K in tax debt and civil penalties plus potential criminal fines. Graham knows everything now. Vera. Good. She earned it. Yeah, she really did. 3 months later, I'm sitting in my apartment on a Tuesday evening in January, Mabel purring on my lap, reading the final settlement documents from Clarice's case. She took a plea deal, pled guilty to 3 counts of tax evasion, got 18 months in federal prison with 2 years supervised release after, and owes the government $218,000 in back taxes and civil penalties, plus $73,000 in criminal fines as part of her plea agreement. Her lawyer managed to keep it out of the newspapers, but you can't keep that kind of thing quiet in a family. Graham filed for annulment in November. Turns out there's a legal provision for marriages based on fraud, and lying about a 6-figure federal crime investigation definitely qualifies. He moved back in with our parents temporarily, which I'm sure is doing wonders for everyone's therapy bills. Mom called me in December. Didn't apologize exactly, but said she understood my position better now after Graham explained the full scope of what had happened. That's Southern parent speak for, I was wrong, but I'll never actually say those words. Dad sent me a text. You did the right thing. Proud of you. That's the most emotional communication I've gotten from him since my college graduation, so I'm counting it as progress. Vera and I got coffee last week. She's doing well. Started dating someone who actually treats her with respect, which is apparently a novel concept after years of friendship with Clarice. We laughed about the whole situation, the kind of dark humor that only comes from surviving something absurd. Do you think she learned anything? Vera asked me, stirring her oat milk latte. I think she learned that actions have consequences. Whether that translates to actual change? I shrugged. That's above my pay grade. I'm an accountant, not a miracle worker. The wedding photos are still on Graham's Facebook, but Clarice's accounts have all gone dark. Her boutique website shows a generic, temporarily closed message. Her Instagram, where she used to post daily outfit photos and inspirational quotes about girl boss culture, hasn't been updated since October 13th. The last post is a mirror selfie with the caption, "Big day tomorrow. Can't wait to marry my best friend." The irony is not lost on me. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I wish I'd handled things differently, if maybe I could have been less harsh, more forgiving, more family-oriented. And here's the thing. I don't regret following the law. I don't regret protecting my professional license. I don't regret refusing to be complicit in federal crimes just because someone shares a last name with my brother. What I do regret is that it had to come to that in the first place. That Clarice looked at me and saw someone she could manipulate rather than someone who might actually help her if she'd been honest. That my brother chose to believe lies because they were prettier than the truth. That my parents initially prioritized keeping the peace over supporting the daughter who was doing the right thing. But you know what I don't regret? That Reuben sandwich. That was a really good sandwich. I've learned some things over these past 3 months. Learned that family loyalty has to go both ways, or it's just exploitation with a nicer name. Learned that being kind doesn't mean being a doormat, and setting boundaries doesn't make you the villain no matter how much someone cries about it. Learned that the IRS doesn't care about your wedding day, your feelings, or how pretty you look in a white dress. They care about numbers, documentation, and whether you paid your taxes. And honestly, there's something refreshing about that level of objectivity. Graham and I have dinner once a week now. We don't talk about Clarice much. He's working through his feelings with a therapist, trying to figure out how he missed all the red flags. I don't rub it in. There's no satisfaction in watching your brother process the fact that he married someone who saw him as a credit card with a pulse. We talk about other things, his work, my work, the Hornets' terrible season. Normal sibling stuff. We're rebuilding. Mom still brings up the situation occasionally, usually in the form of, well, at least now we know what could have happened if you hadn't intervened. It's the closest she'll ever come to admitting I saved Graham from a decade of financial abuse and legal liability. I'll take it. The funniest part? When Mom's sister got married in December, she specifically called me beforehand to say, "Please come. You're invited. We want you there. No fire code issues, I promise." The fact that she had to clarify that tells you everything you need to know about how that October day became family legend. I'm doing fine. Work is good. Mabel is judgmental but affectionate. My apartment is quiet and drama-free. I've started seeing someone, a high school teacher named Felix, who I met through a friend in December. He thinks my Clarice story is both hilarious and horrifying in equal measure. He calls it my origin story, like I'm some kind of accountant superhero. Maybe I am. Saving the world one tax fraud report at a time. Would I do it all again? Absolutely. Would I do anything differently? Maybe bring an umbrella to the wedding. That drizzle really did ruin my hair. But the rest? The reporting, the documentation, the standing firm while everyone told me I was wrong? I'd do it exactly the same way. Because at the end of the day, integrity isn't about making people comfortable. It's about being able to look yourself in the mirror and know you did the right thing, even when the right thing cost you a Saturday afternoon and a brother's wedding. Though honestly, I think that wedding cost me a lot less than it would have cost Graham if I'd stayed quiet. Fire code. I completely understood, and I always will.